Folks, we're heading in. This is our headliner act. The headline is for tonight. Kim and Andreas. I'm going to step off the stage now after I get them fully set up here. Hang on. Okay, so I'm going to be sitting down there with my timer. And yeah, okay, take it away.
The pressure of going after Cameron's so charismatic. So hi everyone, thank you for coming and attending our talk. We're going to be presenting a little bit on adapting sex ed language for diverse genders, bodies, and sexualities. And we put the A in there just to be a little bit more inclusive. Just so you know, Andreas and I are sex educators, so this originally is for teachers, but we adapted a little bit for this context. So you might notice it's a bit didactic because we work a lot with teachers, but we're going to present it the way it is. You ready?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think so. I guess a quick note, I tried to schedule some tweets for this, and that was a terrible idea. It went pretty badly. So if you see them kind of all over the place, or if some are missing, then expect them later. And please tweet the crap out of our amazing infographics.
Can you get into the mic a little more? Can you raise
Yes.
it up?
Yeah. Okay. How's this?
Yeah, I think
Cool.
so, yeah.
Thank you.
So Andreas and I both work for a community organization. It's a nonprofit. It's called AIDS Community Care Montreal. And we provide support services for people living with HIV and Hep C. We also have these fun stickers in the back that says HIV is not a crime. So I encourage you to pick some of these up. If you didn't know, HIV is criminalized. But today, Andreas and I are coming to speak a little bit about our own department, the Education for Prevention Department, where we do a lot of sex education. We provide a program called Teacher Sex Ed Toolkit, which basically provides sex ed lesson plans for teachers online, free, where they can download. We do sexual health workshops, kiosks. We go out in the city all the time working with youth, working with lots of different populations, MSM populations, that's men who have sex with men. And we have a ton of promo for all our materials, so you can come and grab those if you want. But today, more specifically, we're going to talk about Sex Ed,
a program that I run. So essentially anyone can text this number, any questions that they have about sex, you can do it right now. And we'll give an answer within 24 hours. So this is free, it's confidential, it's anonymous. We don't see people's numbers. We chose a 514 number because we work with a lot of younger people who are on their parents' phone plans. So if it's a 514 number, then they're texting their friend Ed. Yeah. Yeah, and we aim, within this, we also aim to do a lot of teaching people how to teach themselves. So we always give them links to amazing resources like Scarletine, Sexuality and You, where they can learn how to learn what they need to on their own as well. Yeah. So this presentation and what we've learned, what we've gathered here has really been created for this program specifically. Our volunteers use, some of whom are here, hello, thank you for coming, use this checklist to ensure that the language that we use in the text that we send out is inclusive, because people don't exactly tell us like their gender, their sex, and all of that within 160 characters. Very difficult. We haven't seen that yet. You're welcome to try. So we've adapted this to make it as usable for everyday conversations, or everyday for people who are here, who are talking about sex and bodies constantly. But we're not experts in this. This is what we've learned in our own thing, and please take it with that and take what you can from it and take it to your own lives.
It's particularly useful for people who are writing a lot.
Yes.
So if you're writing a lot, these are some great tips to keep in mind when you're writing for whatever audience you're talking to.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so a quick note before we get started. Inclusive language is always changing. We've tried to get a fix on where it is right now. We might have not got there. You might disagree with that, and you can definitely bring that up in the Q&A. We love to talk about it, clearly, because we're here. And we'll be using the medical terms for certain parts, which it's the best solution that we've found so far. So that's calling things penis, a clitoris, that kind of thing. It's particularly people who are trans may not call their parts using these terms, and you can see a bunch of other options that they may use, and you should be able to access this later on if I can figure out how to schedule tweets better. Yeah.
So, the first question we always want to ask ourselves when we're writing anything new, when we're reading or we're writing to any type of audience, am I making assumptions about people's gender or sexual/romantic orientation? And also, if family's involved, am I gendering someone's family members? So to give you a few examples of where this happens pretty often, when you're up in front of the stage and you're saying, ladies and gentlemen, you've already gendered everybody in here and alienated some people probably. So that comes up often when you're talking about parents. So you might say your mother gave birth to you. When you're with your boyfriend or with your husband or wife, those are very common places where we add in gender that's not necessarily important. So when it comes to gender-neutral group names, we could say, hey, everyone, or if you're teaching, morning class, or hey there, cool cats. Everyone likes to be a cool cat. Andreas has a specific one.
Yeah, so the last time we presented this was for teachers, and one of their school mascots was the purple penguins. So at the beginning of every class, they would say, hey there, purple penguins, and it would be lovely.
So when it comes to names and pronouns for partners, so you can say, are you seeing someone? What are they like? What about respecting your significant other is important instead of boyfriend or wife, whatever that situation is. Partners are great, but it's healthy to have friends too. So there are a lot of different options. When it comes to family members, you can say things like siblings instead of saying brother or sister. Are you close to your parents instead of mom and dad? You can also keep in mind that not everyone is super close to their birth parents, so being aware that people might have guardians or other family members that have raised you, keep in mind that those are all situations as well, so you don't want to make assumptions about what a person's parents or people that raised them, what they're like.
So the next thing that you can ask yourself is if you're gendering people who have certain anatomy, have certain body parts. Yeah, so examples are boys' testicles create sperm. Women need to get regular pap smears or should get regular pap smears because all women have a cervix, right? Yeah, so an alternative to this is just talking about the parts that are involved or, using anatomy rather than gender in this case. So you can say that hair appears. It's a generally true statement if you're talking about puberty. For some people, hair appears. Breasts develop. Penises or clitorises get erect. It just removes gender from the equation altogether. You can also use bodies with or person with kind of language. So many bodies have anuses. It's wonderful.
Many.
People who have ovaries may be able to get pregnant. Bodies with penises may ejaculate semen. So again, it's shifting, removing gender and going toward true statements, essentially. And this section in particular includes people who are trans or intersex.
Oh, just a quick note as well. We often try to use the term many or may just because we don't want to assume that this happens to everyone. We don't want to make that assumption, so we say many to make it less alienating.
Yeah. We probably won't have time to get into that in detail, but if you check out the checklist or handout, then you have a lot of options for that.
So next question, am I gendering what bodies may do or how they might develop? So common situations, when women start menstruating or men ejaculate in their sleep, very common things to be talking about when it comes to the sex education context. So what you can do instead, switch out names or nouns for body functions. So you can say ovulation happens or ejaculation begins rather than putting gender in there. And again, you can also use the people who are bodies that language. So people who lactate instead of women, people who feel sexual attractions. And again, we're not saying everybody, we're just saying people who feel. So it applies to whoever that applies to. Bodies that make pre-cum. So lots of examples you can see here. And then, so when you're talking specifically about puberty, it's great to talk about hormones and how they affect your body. So testosterone, estrogen, testicles can start making testosterone, testosterone causes blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, so here we get to see a bit of how the ways that it can be used. But another question that you can ask yourself is if you're gendering safer sex practices or the people who are using them. Yeah, so a lot of people may still use male and female condoms. Ideally, we're trying to move toward internal and external condoms, which removes the sex or gendered terms from condoms, safer sex products that everyone can use, actually. So for, yes, you can also say condoms and external condoms, and most people will actually understand what you mean. Yeah, so instead of something like if a woman is on the pill, you can say people with ovaries can use hormonal birth control to block ovulation, or bodies that ejaculate semen can catch that with a condom. Yeah. You can also, like we mentioned before, talk more about the parts that are involved. So you can roll a condom onto a penis or sex toy. Yeah. Another great thing that actually just clarifies a lot of things, because a lot of people, if you say sex, shoot, okay. If you say sex, that can mean a lot of things to different people. So if you clarify that and say something like penis and vagina sex, for penis and vagina sex, the pill can reduce the chances of pregnancy. Condoms can reduce the chances of pregnancy and STIs. Wonderful things like that. And then including things like dental dams and gloves can include the ways that more people have sex. And you can use it in the same way so that it includes anyone who might want to have those kinds of sex. Yeah. A quick note, you can also, yeah, so that's it for our tips right now. It's a lot to take in at once. Breathe. And try to be easy on yourself. It's like learning a new language, and the best way to learn a language is just to go out there and practice. If you screw up, then you can say sorry and move on, but don't let that hold you back. And then that will eventually get you to using these very fluidly and easily. Yeah, so that's it. Cool.
So does anyone have any questions? We have our references here. As Andreas said, our PowerPoint's going to be available on Twitter, right? Eventually. And there's a bunch of other stuff that's included in the PowerPoint as well, just other resources that might be interesting, other people that are getting involved in making things more gender neutral. So, yeah, and there's a checklist as well in the back.
I'm just wondering about the resistance to this from professors or teachers. You know, how is it going?
Yeah, it definitely... it depends on the people. And the last time that we had this, it actually, we ended up changing the workshop, which was much longer, into more of a conversation. And a lot of people just had amazing ideas that we've added to the checklist. That's why that group is there. And please, if anyone has more ideas to add, please do that here as well. And a lot of people, especially I find people who are teaching younger students, tend to think like, oh, this is too complicated. They won't really get it. But in the end, it's actually a lot more specific. And a lot of people, especially people with developmental disabilities, such as autism, might actually have trouble kind of understanding the idea of gender and all of the things that kind of you're supposed to know that go with them. But if you use something like this, then it's just every statement that you make is true, essentially. Yeah.
And it is pretty dependent on the teachers. Like we presented this to sex educators, and they're open to it, and they are keen on like applying this into their education. But when it comes to like regular teachers, who we encounter a lot of just regular teachers who are trying to take on sex education for the first time, and for them it is a little like it's definitely more difficult, and they're kind of like, but why can't we just say like men and women or boys and girls? Like the understanding isn't quite there in terms of the inclusiveness and making sure that everyone, when you speak to your audience, that no one feels left out or alienated because of your language, essentially. So it's a tough sell for some, and then for others, it's just like, I'm so happy to have these resources now. So there's a range.
Yeah.
I have one question because I have sort of thought about different ways to do that, but I always love hearing other people and what they do, especially in the context of sexuality education. Because I love gender neutral language, and I think it's super important. But another part of that as a sexuality educator is mirroring the language that you get. So like, there's various ways that people do that, sort of bridging the gap between mirroring the person's language and then, but also kind of suggesting other alternatives. And sometimes that can be awkward, and especially when it comes to sex ed, it's a very limited like amount of characters that you have to do a lot of shit. So I'm wondering like, any like advice and things that we do.
Yeah. Typically, with sex ed at least, we usually get a lot of more personal questions, so it's actually fairly easy to mirror what they're saying. Like if they describe a situation, if they're talking about something that's happened with their boyfriend or something like that, you can see that I'm using the they pronoun because I don't know that, but I can still call their boyfriend their boyfriend. So it gets a bit easier. But I can understand how that might create that kind of fourth wall actually within sex education. And I'd have to think about that a bit more. Yeah.
I think what you're saying though too about like reflecting language and then after kind of inserting your own ways of speaking, I think that's a nice way to introduce things slowly to students. And I think a lot of the times they're kind of like, oh, that's weird. But then at least you planted that seed and they know that there's this alternative. And when you explain, this is why I use this term, then they have that understanding, and that kind of education can go further. Also, just to comment, like in a lot of the stuff that you see today, where it seems like very like, never talk about gender or remove gender from everything, but that's also not what we're advocating for. I think when it comes to sexuality education, you have to talk about gender dynamics and how those things influence different things. So this is for like general speaking about things, but there's also a huge importance of talking about how gender affects different people's experiences and stuff like that. So that's really important as well.
Absolutely.
Hi.
Hey.
So I practice gender neutral parenting with my toddler. She's 2. And so I try and use things like they, and I use the word vulva with her. And I say like, most people have eyes. That's right, honey. But I'm starting to hit a little bit of a wall here because we've got this great book by Jada Pinkett Smith, and it's called Girls Hold Up the World. And I'm trying to like instill in her this pride of being a girl. So, but then she's like, "What's a girl?" And so I'm like, this God, what makes a girl? And then when we're talking about strangers, we use sign language. We say, "Oh, that's a person," or "That's a child." But we're starting to get into like girl and boy and man and woman and everything. And I don't want to be like, "That's a male presenting person" every time we talk about the guy who's waving to her or something. You know? How do you navigate this?
Oh yeah. Yeah, thank you.
First of all, that you're doing that with your
fantastic.
kids. That's very like forward-thinking parenting. But I think that is tied with like making sure that even though you're teaching like gender neutrality and the importance of being like kind of all-inclusive, because we live in a world that is so gendered, it is important to have those discussions about this is how I've taught you, but also know that this is not how the world perceives everything. But it's a slow process because there's so many things in society that's going to mess up everybody and mess up your kids and all this stuff. So you have to kind of gradually say, this is what I've taught you, but know that this isn't how everybody sees it. And then you can start addressing different things as you see them. Like if you're walking, this is a male presenting person, this is, we talked about gender, and then this person might look like a man, but you don't know, but they in society, you usually go with what you see, and I mean it's super hard.
Yeah.
But are people raising their hands for suggestions?
Okay. Oh, I saw a few suggestions.
So I guess talking, this doesn't remove self-determination of gender, not like, it's not to say like there are no men or there are no women. That's not, I feel like that's not what this presentation is trying to say one way or the other, but just that if someone's hearing that all women menstruate and they're a woman and they don't menstruate for whatever reason, they don't want to feel that dysphoria every time they hear about menstruation or whatever. So it's just a way to make education accessible to people so they can learn about what's happening to their bodies without the like pain of being misgendered every single time the discussion happens, I think. Like I feel like there's two different discussions. There's are there men and women and what is gender, and then there's like are there body parts that do certain things, and we have to have those discussions in the same space.
Yeah, as Kim mentioned earlier, you can definitely still talk about gender dynamics and especially sexism and feminism, and certainly promote that. In general, there are a lot of pressures on girls, and there talk about the issues without necessarily without getting into body parts, essentially. Like as long as you stick to gender, there are girls. So you can talk about that. I hope that helps. Yeah. Yeah. I know that there were a few other suggestions though, and I'd love to hear them still. They haven't been covered. Yes.
So my suggestion, I don't know how you compare this to like a 2-year-old because I'm not great with this, but like just to be honest. But basically what I would say is like if your child is asking what's a girl, you could say, well, I mean this is what I would say. I would say like often a girl is associated with someone who has a vulva, but it's not necessarily that, you know, like it could be, a girl could be someone who has a penis and, you know, maybe even wants to get a surgery, take it out. I don't know how far you can go with a 2-year-old with this, but you can kind of be like, in most cases, this is what a girl is, and in most cases, this is what a guy is. But it can change, you know, and you can tell your child. That's why it's important to be open to people who don't necessarily fit in the way that everyone sees girls and the way that everyone sees boys. You know, there's people like in between and all over the place.
Absolutely.
I don't know if that makes any sense. I feel like I'm mumbled that.
I know.
But
Wibbly wobbly.
yeah.
It's mostly just because she calls everyone a mama and a dada, and I'm like, well, no, they're not. And I'm like, oh.
You're gonna go through at least another 2 years of this where you're gonna be unsure what to go. When she starts to get like 4 or 5, her mentality is gonna change. She's gonna understand. Right now,
Super simple.
yeah. But good luck, and you're doing great with that.
Yeah.
Everybody is.
We'll all
Yeah.
learn together.
Yeah. I can't think of specific books that they produce, but there's also a publisher out of Toronto, Pink Flamingo Press, if I remember correctly. Esther Bergman, who is like big trans advocate here, is heavily involved. So you might be able to find some books that might be able to explain it better than we can. Yeah.
Any other questions?
I have to explain gender in writing and everyone laughs, but it's actually fairly easy to do with the one thing. How do you do singular they? I've never come across anything. Can you say speak that out?
So, okay, I'll just say the question out loud. So there's a question about writing in gender-neutral language in French, and we're looking another language, and we're looking for a singular they. I have an answer, but please. Amazing.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah.
As in English, there's a lot of options. There's yel, there's e, and as I understand, the normative would be e, which is written I-double-L-E, add an S for the plural. And then for adjectives, you can have, there's options as well. For example, heureux, which is happy, feminine masculine. You can add the two together without any dots. That's an option. You can say heureux. And you can
Oh. Cool.
We should be hitting her up.
Yeah.
Please share your contact information.
Yes.
We need more help on the French side for sure.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So I think that's all the time that we have. Thank you for everyone's participation. We always learn from our audience.